Okay, so before we get into today's lesson, I want to make a little bit of a personal appeal. And now when I say this, I am going to get into asking you to think about maybe what you can contribute to what we're doing here, but I don't want you to tune me out. Just give me a chance, okay? So as we sit here and we look at the amount of growth that we've experienced as a church, a part of that is that, we have to be able to evolve and we have to be able to kind of flex what people are doing and all that. Along with that, I know at the Hub Church, we've already had to do things differently. We've already had to look for different places to be able to do things. We've had to look at getting different people involved, and those are all good things, but they do from time to time require people to step up and be willing to take on not the whole thing, but maybe a piece of a thing. And that's what I'm asking you guys here today as well. When we look at what goes on at home church, you look at what the Grays do, and especially Shar, she's a little Energizer bunny, right? She doesn't stop. I get it because I'm a little bit of a kindred spirit in that way. But when you put all of your eggs in that one basket, it makes it so that obviously if she's not available, it's a lot harder, right? Now, fortunately, you guys have been really awesome in stepping up from time to time when it's really needed, but we want to start looking a little bit more than that. And so what specifically do I want to ask for? If either A, you think that you'd be willing to open up your home and not do any of the other stuff. I'm not talking about facilitating or setting up childcare or any of the other stuff that the Grays do, but you would be willing to open up your home, then let us know. Let us know you'd be willing to do at least that much. Okay, say that's not your gig. Okay, then that's fine. I get it. Look, I got small kids too. My house is a mess frequently. So with that being said, say I wouldn't be willing to open up my home, but if somebody else would open up their home, I'd be more than happy to facilitate. Yeah, let us know that too. Because, we can work out locations, but if you're willing to facilitate, that in and of itself is a huge help. Okay, we'll say I can't open up my home. I don't really know if I'm a facilitator, but I would be willing to help out with kids a little bit. I know that a lot of times we have these babysitters, and that's fantastic. But that being said, especially as things get bigger and bigger, occasionally, like on a rare occasion, I'm not talking about even a once a month thing, but if on rare occasions you'd be willing to go and help out with the kids a little bit, yeah, let us know that too. You can see as you start breaking all of this down, there are tons of different ways you can help be a part of what we're doing here. And I think the main thing that I want to try to get across is just to put it this way. We've all been getting a whole lot out of what's going on here. Even from my perspective, I've been getting a lot out of it, just kind of facilitating these videos. Because we've all been getting something out of it, it would be really awesome if we had some ability to maybe put just a little bit into it in some way, shape, or form. So what I would ask for you to do is to just think about it really hard. And if there's something inside of you that says, I think I'd be willing to do something. I can't do the whole thing. I can only do a tiny fraction of it. Then bring up to us what that tiny fraction is, because that is ultimately how we're going to get in a position where we can reach more people, where more people can be able to benefit from this awesome experience that we too have been able to experience for ourselves. So don't focus on all of the reasons why you can't do something, because you know what? If you really don't want to do something, there's always going to be a reason to not do it. Instead, I just want you to ask yourself, are you willing to do something? And if you are, then let's talk about the obstacles and we'll see if we can't get over those. So that's all I have. I'll go ahead and get off the stage for right now before I get back on that stage right over there where the other camera is, and then we continue with today's lesson. So thank you very much. Thank you for considering. Thank you for anybody who is considering volunteering for any form of what we're doing here, and I hope to hear back from some of you guys. So God bless, and I'll see you in a few seconds. Have you ever had somebody in the past try saying something along the lines of, only God can judge me? Well, that's kind of true and it's kind of not true. You see, the Bible does actually talk about something that we would probably commonly say is judging one another. It's really accountability, but the Bible has a couple things that says about that. What's important to understand, though, is that even though there are aspects of the Bible that do talk about accountability and helping to instruct one another and things like this, the Bible is not about your neighbor. It's not. I know this sounds funny because we talk a lot about how we need to stop being so self-centered and how we need to not just focus on ourselves or anything like that. But the story of the Bible, all of the commandments and the instructions and things like that, They're all lessons for us to apply in our own lives, not things for us to sit here and enforce and impose on other people. Once you start realizing that, you can start understanding why a lot of people have unfortunately taken Christianity in a very, very bad direction. Instead, using the Bible like a bludgeon to beat other people over the head with, trying to convince them that they're not living in the exact correct way, when in reality, what we end up seeing in the Bible is a bunch of lessons for us. Now that we have a relationship with God, now that we know who Jesus Christ is, and commandments that we need to love and show compassion to other individuals. This is something that isn't just some kind of new age progressive type of thing that's coming from Pastor Joseph or anything like that. This is something that we see Paul himself actually talk about in the book of Romans, and we will get to that. But what I want you guys to do first is to read a little bit about where we do see examples in the Bible, mostly in the epistles to Timothy, that talk about judgment, that talk about accountability. And what I think you're going to notice in here is that, ironically, all of the lessons about judgment and accountability more often are actually directed to those who flatter themselves as being some kind of spiritual leader or some kind of teacher, rather than it does the average congregant or churchgoer. In John 8:15, Jesus says, "You judge by human standards, but I judge no one." And I absolutely love that, because what that does is it sets up this very interesting situation where individuals who want to get into the whole judgment game have to stop and ask themselves, do I see myself as more qualified than Jesus? Because what we see Jesus himself saying is that you guys are going to sit here and look at the world, and you're going to look at how you act and the things you do, and you're going to judge people accordingly. But I don't do any of that. And so if we're going to sit here and look at other people, we're going to judge them, we must stop and say, do I think I am more qualified than Jesus? And if you are, then that's really, really cool. That's awesome. I guess go on judging. And also, I'd probably like to meet you. But given the fact that most of us probably aren't in that boat, we have to stop and recognize that Jesus himself didn't judge those other individuals, so why should we? Instead, what we end up seeing is what I talked about just a moment ago, that we ourselves came to Christ because God offered love. He offered compassion. He offered mercy. He wasn't this angry, belligerent God that just wanted to sit here and hold us under his thumb all the time. Instead, he looked at us in our sinful state when we didn't deserve any kind of mercy or any kind of pathway back to him, and he said, here, I'm going to offer it to you anyway. And that was attractive to us. So why would we turn around and try to attract other individuals to the cross by beating them over the head with the Bible, by telling them that they're living the wrong way or anything like that? It just doesn't make any sense. Now, that's not to say that for people who don't have a relationship with God, that the truth doesn't matter. It's not to say that at all. The truth is still the truth, but it's just to say that if you go to an individual who doesn't have a relationship with the God of truth and you try beating them over the head with some of the things that Christ has instructed us without telling them who this Christ is, those messages aren't really going to land on their ears all that effectively. It's not going to mean anything to them because they have no relationship with this God. And so first, when we sit here and we look at our interactions of other people, we have to stop and we have to reconfigure our perspective. Instead of looking at them as individuals who are doing things that are either good or doing things that are bad, we instead have to look at other individuals as people who need a relationship with God, as people who need to be reconciled back with their Creator, and in doing that can have this richer and much more glorious life than they could have ever imagined otherwise. All of the things about good behaviors, bad behaviors, things that are edifying, things that are not edifying, those are things for us to apply in our own lives. And sure, when somebody else ends up coming to know Christ and we want to build them up and disciple them and help them to have a deeper relationship, sure, let's get into all the accountability and everything. But until that point comes, it's important for us to understand what first brought us to the cross. It wasn't God's wrath that brought us to the point that Jesus was hanging on a cross for our sins. It was God's love. And if that's the case, then that is what we should be showing the lost world. I love this description of what Paul gives when it comes to what it means to be a good Christian. All these attributes that talk about ourselves, of how we should act, the spirit that we should have, the way our conduct should be driven. This is the way that we should be applying the Bible correctly, is as something to look at ourselves. And now there's two things for us to take away when it comes to the subject of judging. The first thing is what we've been talking about this whole time. We need to be very, very cautious how we apply that skill or that action of judging to other individuals. If it comes to standing up for truth, to pushing back against false teaching, absolutely, then you need to judge the teachings that somebody's giving you. Hey, just because a pastor tells you something, just because somebody who sounds like they're Christian-y says something, don't just take it on trust that they must be right. Judge for yourself. Read the Word, read the Scriptures, meditate on what God has told you, and judge what they say. And if they are saying something that is false, judge them harshly. You owe it to them, and you owe it to your brothers and sisters in Christ to admonish those individuals, even if it is myself, if we ever get off the beaten path and are leading people down a bad road. Now there's a second part of this though, and that second part is when it comes to us being the recipient of judgment. We have to acknowledge that all of the teachings that are there in the Bible are things that really exist for us to sit here and build up our own relationship with God. And if that's the case, that can come many different ways. We have to be very careful as individuals who do know God, as individuals who do listen to the teachings of Christ, to not sit here and push back against the good counsel of our brothers and sisters just because they tell us something that might be uncomfortable, just because they tell us something that might be inconvenient or might be something that we don't want to hear. We shouldn't sit here and be very quick to throw the card out there and say, well, you can't judge me, because the reality is that maybe the reason why that individual is coming up to us is not because they're judging you out of the meanness of their heart, but maybe they're trying to hold you accountable. Maybe they're trying to help build you up and disciple to you and help to reveal to you part of the truth that we see in the Scriptures. Both of those things can be true at the same time, and it can be deeply dissatisfying because it seems like it's not fair from our perspective. It can seem like it's not fair that somebody can tell me that I should or shouldn't be doing something, but that I should afford other people grace, love, and mercy. But if you think about it, that right there is the nature of the disciples. That right there is the nature of what we see Christ doing. And even in his own life, even though he wasn't being criticized, we absolutely see him taking a lot of abuse from other individuals and yet turning around and affording to others love and compassion at every single step. That is ultimately what we're called to do. And if we can live that way, then we will truly live as individuals that stand apart from the rest of this world. Hopefully in doing that, we can show other people just a glimpse of that love and compassion that first attracted us to the cross. That's the lesson that I have for you here today. I hope you're able to get something out of it. Until we can meet again, God bless.